Some betrayals happen in the dark, behind closed doors, in hushed voices, with careful smiles and clean hands. And the person who gets hurt is left standing in the wreckage, wondering if they imagined the whole thing, wondering if maybe they are the problem. This is a story about a woman named Zara, a woman who was told, from the very first day of her marriage, that she was the problem, that she was too sensitive, too dramatic, too difficult, too much. She believed it for longer than she should have. And then one day, she stopped believing it. And what she did next changed everything. Take 1 second right now, before this story begins, and hit subscribe. Because stories like this one are rare. Stories where the quiet person wins. Where patience becomes power. Where a woman who was handed nothing builds something so solid, so real, so undeniable, that the people who broke her spend the rest of their lives explaining themselves to the wrong side of a courtroom. Welcome to a story about 7 years. 7 years of silence that was never surrender. 7 years of watching and waiting and building. And one morning when it all came due. Her name was Zara. She was 24 years old when she got married. She was 31 when her real life finally began. And everything that happened in those 7 years in between. This is that story. Zara grew up in a middle-class family in a mid-sized city where weddings were events and reputations were currency. Her father was a school teacher, quiet, careful, deeply honest in the way that some people are honest because they genuinely cannot imagine being otherwise. Her mother was warm and hardworking and had 2 great loves in life, her children and her garden. Zara had a younger sister named Nadia who was everything loud that Zara was not. Bright, funny, the kind of girl who filled a room just by walking into it. Zara was the older one. The steady one. The one who got things done without making noise about it. She had finished her accounting degree at the top of her class. She had a sharp mind for numbers, the kind of mind that sees patterns where other people see chaos. She had a job offer from a firm in the city before she had even collected her degree certificate. She was, in every sense, ready for her life. And then her parents arranged her marriage. His name was Cameron. Tall, well-dressed, the son of a prosperous family that owned a textile business that had been running for 30 years. His mother, Sheila, was a woman who had navigated the social world of their city for decades and wore that navigation like armor, polished, polite, and absolutely impenetrable. His father, Rafiq, was quieter. He sat at the back of rooms and observed. He had the eyes of a man who had long ago learned that the best position is the one nobody notices you in. And Cameron himself was charming in the way that men who have always gotten what they wanted can be charming. Easy smile. Good manners in front of guests. The kind of son-in-law that parents show off to their friends. The families met 4 times before the engagement. Everything seemed fine. That word. Fine. Zara would spend years thinking about how much damage that word had done. The wedding was large. 400 guests. Zara wore red and gold and smiled until her face ached. She remembers sitting in the bridal chair under the lights, surrounded by women she mostly didn't know, and feeling a strange, hollow nervousness that she told herself was normal. That every bride felt. That it would pass. It didn't pass. On the first night in her new home, Sheila, her mother-in-law, knocked on the bedroom door at 11 o'clock at night. She didn't wait to be invited in. She simply opened the door. Zara was sitting on the edge of the bed, still in her wedding clothes, exhausted down to her bones. Sheila looked at her with a smile that did not reach her eyes and said, "I hope you understand, Betty, that this house runs a certain way. My son has certain needs. My household has certain standards. I want us to start as we mean to go on." Zara looked at her new mother-in-law standing in the doorway of her bedroom on her wedding night. "Of course," she said politely. "I hope we can have a good relationship." Sheila's smile didn't change. "That depends entirely on you," she said. And she closed the door. Zara told herself, in those first weeks, that it was an adjustment period. That every new bride felt out of place in her husband's family home. That Sheila was simply a strong woman who liked order. That Cameron was distracted with work. That things would settle. She told herself these things with great dedication. The things she didn't tell herself, the things she noticed but carefully filed away somewhere she didn't look directly, were different. Like the way Sheila would criticize her cooking in front of guests with a light, laughing voice, as if it were affection. She's still learning. Bless her. Her mother clearly didn't teach her much about a kitchen. Like the way Cameron would agree with his mother in front of the family and then say nothing when they were alone, neither defending Zara nor apologizing. Just silence. As if the incident had not happened. Like the way her salary, which she had continued earning from the firm that had hired her before the wedding, was expected to be contributed to the household fund. An expectation that had never been discussed. That was simply announced one evening by Sheila as though it were obvious. In this family, we all contribute, Sheila had said. You earn. You are part of this family. Your money is family money. Cameron had nodded. Zara had said nothing. But she had opened, the following morning, a separate savings account in her own name. Nobody knew. Not yet. By the end of the first year, Zara had a clear picture of the geography of her life. Sheila ran the house. Sheila ran Cameron. And Cameron, for all his charm and his easy smile, was a man who had been raised to take the path of least resistance. And the path of least resistance was always, to agree with his mother. Zara was not unhappy in the operatic, weeping way of women in old films. She was unhappy in a quieter, more dangerous way. She was unhappy in the way you are unhappy when you realize the life you are living belongs to someone else. When you are 25 years old and you understand, with a cold clarity, that the person you married chose his family over you before you even arrived, and will keep choosing them every single time, for as long as you stay. She could have left then. She thought about it. Seriously, honestly, she thought about it. But there were two things that stopped her. The first was her parents. Her father was not well. His heart was giving him trouble, quietly and persistently, in the way that hearts do when they have been working too hard for too long. A divorce, the word, the scandal, the whisper of it moving through their community, she was afraid it would finish him. The second thing that stopped her was something colder and more strategic. She had started to see, in those first 12 months, that the life she was living was not simply unkind. It was illegal in parts. And Zara was an accountant. She understood exactly what that meant. Let me pause here for a moment. Because I know some of you watching this right now are sitting in a version of what Zara was sitting in. A life that looks fine from the outside. A family that has very good manners in public. A husband who is charming at dinner parties. And a private world that is small and controlled and slowly, quietly suffocating. If that is you, hear this. You are not imagining it. Write it down. Date it. Keep the record. The truth does not need to be loud to be real. Comment the word witness below so I know you heard that. Now, back to Zara. The second year of her marriage brought two things. The first was a pregnancy. The second was the real face of the family she had married into. Zara was 3 months pregnant when she discovered the first irregularity. She hadn't been looking for it. She was simply good at her job, and her job was numbers. And numbers don't lie even when people do. Cameron had asked her, almost casually, over dinner one evening, to look over some invoices for the family business. The regular accountant was sick. It was nothing complicated. Just make sure the columns added up. She said yes. She took the file to her desk that evening. And by midnight, she had found the first thing that didn't add up. It was small. Easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. A supplier payment that appeared in the accounts twice. Once in the business ledger and once in a personal expense log that was attached to the wrong file. A duplication. An amount that, on its own, meant little. But Zara had spent a year watching this family. She had watched Sheila manage every rupee that flowed through this household with the precision of a general managing a campaign. Nothing was accidental. Nothing was careless. Every number that appeared in Sheila's world had been put there deliberately, which meant this duplication was also deliberate. She did not say anything that night. She made a copy of the relevant pages. She locked them in the back of her personal files. And the next morning, she handed Cameron the corrected invoices with a pleasant smile. "All done," she said. "The columns balance." He thanked her without really looking at her. She went to work. And she started watching the accounts more carefully. Over the next 6 months, she found 4 more irregularities. Each one small. Each one deniable on its own. Together, they formed a pattern. Money moving between the business accounts and personal accounts in ways that weren't documented. Supplier payments made to companies whose names she couldn't trace to any real business address. Expenses claimed against the company that, when she looked carefully, seemed to belong to Sheila's personal expenditure. It was not a dramatic fraud. It was a quiet, careful, long-running fraud. The kind that had been running for years because nobody in the family had both the knowledge to see it and the position to care. Zara had both. She kept copying. She kept filing. She kept her face pleasant and her voice even, and she did not, even once, give them any reason to think she had found anything at all. Her son was born in the spring. She named him Adam. He had her eyes and Cameron's nose and the most peaceful sleeping face she had ever seen in her life. She sat in the hospital bed holding him on the first night, the ward quiet, Cameron asleep in the chair, the whole world distilled down to this small warm weight in her arms, and she made him a silent promise. "I am going to build something for you," she thought. "Something real. Something that cannot be taken. I just need a little more time." Having a child changed the household dynamics in ways she hadn't anticipated. Sheila, to her credit, loved Adam. Genuinely and completely. She became softer in those first months. Less sharp-edged, more present, more willing to let small things pass. Cameron was a good father in the physical sense. He was there. He showed up. He played with his son on the floor and carried him on his shoulders and looked at him with a love that was real. Zara watched this and felt a grief she hadn't expected. Because she could see very clearly that Cameron was capable of choosing. He chose Adam. Every day, he chose Adam without hesitation. He just would not choose. The 3rd year. The 4th. She was promoted twice at work. Senior associate. Then team lead. Her firm was growing and she was growing with it, bringing in clients, managing accounts, building a professional reputation that had nothing to do with whose wife she was or whose daughter-in-law she was or whose house she slept in. At work, she was Zara Mirza, the woman who found what was wrong in your numbers. She was sharp and she was valued and she was treated like a person with a brain. She carried that version of herself home in her chest every evening like a small protected flame. And she did not let the house put it out. She continued building her private file. 3 years in, she had documented 11 separate financial irregularities in the family business. She had cross-referenced them against tax filings, supplier records, and property documents she had quietly requested through legitimate channels. She had organized everything by date, by amount, by type of irregularity. She had also, in those 3 years, done 2 other things. First, she had consulted, carefully, under a friend's name, without specifics, with a lawyer who specialized in financial crime and family law. She had learned exactly what she had and what it was worth. Second, she had kept saving. Every month. Quietly. Steadily. Into the account nobody knew about. She was not building an escape fund. She was building a foundation. There is a difference. The 5th year brought the crisis she had been half expecting. Cameron came home one evening with his mother's energy behind his eyes, the particular set of his face she had learned to read over years, and he told her that the family business needed an injection of capital. That there were opportunities. That he needed her to transfer a significant amount from her personal savings into the business account. For the family, he said. There it was. That phrase. It followed her everywhere. For the family. She asked, calmly, to see the business plan. The projected returns. The legal documentation for the proposed investment. His face changed. It's family, Zara. We don't do paperwork between family. I do, she said. I'm an accountant. Paperwork is how I show I take something seriously. He stared at her for a moment. Then he went to find his mother. Sheila came to speak to her the next morning. It was the most direct conversation they had ever had. You have been difficult since the day you came into this house, Sheila said, her voice smooth and cold. I have been patient. I have been tolerant. But I will not watch you refuse your own family when we need you. I have contributed every month to this household for 5 years, Zara said evenly. I ask only for basic documentation. Any financial professional would tell you the same. You are not a financial professional here. You are a wife. I am both, Zara said. I don't have to choose. The conversation ended there. Cameron did not speak to her warmly for 2 weeks. She did not transfer the money. She had learned, in 5 years, that what looked like stubbornness to them was actually the only protection she had. The 6th year was the year she found the property. She had been doing a routine personal audit, the kind she did for herself twice a year, just to stay clear, when she came across a discrepancy in a land registry search she was running for a client. The plot in question was listed under a holding company. The holding company, when she traced it back through layers of registration documents, connected to a directorship that held a name she recognized. Rafiq, Cameron's father. The same Rafiq who sat quietly at the back of rooms and said very little. The property had been registered 3 years ago. The funds used to acquire it traced back, through 2 intermediary accounts, to the family business. Business funds. Used to purchase personal property. Through a shell company. Not a mistake. Not a coincidence. A deliberate, structured transfer of assets. And it was large enough to matter. Zara sat at her desk for a long time after she found it. She thought about Adam asleep in his room. She thought about her father, whose heart was still managing, slowly and stubbornly, to keep beating. She thought about 7 years. And she thought, clearly, finally, completely, it is time. She did not act immediately. Immediate action is for people who are running on emotion. Zara was running on 7 years of documented evidence and a mind that had been trained to find the exact point where a structure is weakest. She took 3 months. In those 3 months, she did 5 things. The first thing she did was visit a lawyer. Not under a friend's name this time. Her own name. Her own face. Her own file, organized in chronological order. Each document clearly labeled, each irregularity cross-referenced to its source. The lawyer, a woman named Ms. Farouk, who had 30 years of experience and the permanent expression of someone who had heard everything and been surprised by nothing, paged through the file in silence for 20 minutes. Then she looked up. How long did it take you to put this together? 6 years, Zara said. Ms. Farouk looked at her for a long moment. Most people who come to me with financial irregularities in a family business have 1 document. Maybe 2. You have 53. 57, Zara said. I added 4 last month. The lawyer almost smiled. You should have come sooner. I needed to come with everything, Zara said. I only wanted to do this once. The second thing she did was meet with a forensic accounting firm. She hired them on retainer. She shared a portion of her documentation and asked them to verify, independently, the patterns she had identified. They came back in 6 weeks with a report that confirmed everything she had found, and added 3 more irregularities she had missed. She paid them from the account nobody knew about. She filed their report beside her own. The third thing she did was speak to her father. Not about the case. Not yet. Her father's heart was still fragile and she would not load it with this. She went to see him on a Sunday afternoon, sat with him in the garden where her mother's roses were blooming, and she asked him, quietly, to tell her the truth about one thing. Baba, when you arranged this marriage, did you have any concerns? Anything you pushed aside? Her father was quiet for a long time. Then he said, There was one thing. His father. I asked around and someone told me the business had some tax irregularities, years ago. But I thought, a different time. People change. It seemed settled. He looked at her over his garden. Did I make a mistake, Zara? She took his hand. You made the best decision you could with what you knew, she said. That's all anyone can do. She did not tell him what she had found, but she felt something harden, cleanly, inside her chest. They had known, or suspected, and they had moved ahead anyway, with her life as the bet. Her love for her father didn't change, but her hesitation did. The fourth thing she did was the hardest. She sat Cameron down alone, not in anger, not with accusations, with the same level voice she used with difficult clients at work, and she told him what she had found. Not everything. A portion. Enough. She watched his face go through several things very quickly. Surprise. Then something that looked almost like guilt. Then the familiar closing. The way his expression would flatten when he was retreating to a position he had prepared without knowing he was preparing it. You're misunderstanding the documents, he said. It's a family business. The way accounts work in family businesses is different. I know how accounts work in family businesses, she said. I also know how fraudulent asset transfers work. I didn't come to argue with you. I came to tell you, because I thought you deserved to know before anyone else did, that I have this documentation. All of it. And I intend to use it. He stared at her. Use it how? That depends, she said, on what happens next. What happened next was Sheila. Of course it was Sheila. Cameron went to his mother that same evening. She could hear the murmur of voices through the wall, and the next morning, Sheila came to her. But this was not the Sheila of 5 years of small cruelties. Not the woman with the smooth, cold voice who called her difficult and dramatic and not enough. This was a frightened woman. And frightened people are either dangerous or desperate. Sheila tried dangerous first. If you say a single word to anyone about these accounts, she said, her voice low and precise, I will make sure every person in this city knows what kind of wife you have been. How you refused your husband. How you isolated yourself from this family. How you have undermined this household from the day you arrived. Zara looked at her for a long moment. I know, she said calmly. I've been waiting for that threat for years. It doesn't change the documents. Sheila shifted. Then came desperate. Think of Adam. Think of your son. A broken home. Do you want that for him? Do you want him to grow up in the middle of a scandal? I want him to grow up watching his mother be treated like a human being, Zara said. And I want him to grow up knowing that when someone does something wrong, there is a consequence. That is a better lesson than any I could teach him in a whole house. Sheila left without another word. That evening, Zara packed 2 bags. She drove to her parents' house. She had not warned them. The next few months were not simple. Nobody expected them to be. Cameron called. Then his parents called. Then a family elder called, appointed himself mediator, and arrived at her parents' house with the particular confidence of a man who expected one conversation to resolve what 7 years had built. He sat across from her and said, reasonably, that these things happen in families. That financial matters could be settled internally. That her reputation, her son's stability, her position, all of these were at stake. That the wise move was to come back, quietly, and let the adults handle it among themselves. Zara listened to him politely. Then she placed a folder on the table in front of him. This is a summary, she said. 14 pages. The full documentation is with my lawyer. I have shared a portion of it with the tax authority. The rest will go to the Financial Crimes Division within the week unless we begin formal proceedings for both the legal separation and the financial disclosure. He looked at the folder without touching it. Then he looked at her. She held his eyes. He picked up the folder. Here is what happened over the following 5 months. Ms. Farooq filed for legal separation on Zara's behalf, citing financial misconduct and the documented evidence of asset misappropriation. The family business was audited, partly as a result of the portion of documentation Zara had shared with the tax authority, and partly because audits, once started, tend to find things. They found things. Rafiq, the quiet man who sat at the back of rooms, turned out to have been the architect of a long-running arrangement that had quietly drained a significant portion of business earnings into personal holdings over more than a decade. It was not the loudest fraud anyone had ever seen, but it was thorough, and it had been running long enough that the amounts, added together, were very significant. Cameron, and this was the part that surprised her, slightly, was largely not involved. Not because he was innocent in spirit, but because his father had never trusted him enough to include him. He had been kept comfortable and kept ignorant, managed by his mother into a comfortable position where he signed what was put in front of him and asked no difficult questions. He was not a villain. He was a failure of a different kind. A man who had chosen, his entire life, the path of least resistance, and had arrived, at 40, standing in the rubble of his family's legal proceedings, holding very little of his own. Zara felt, when she understood this, not satisfaction. Something sadder. Pity, almost. A pity she did not indulge for long. The legal separation was granted. Custody arrangements for Adam were negotiated, carefully, slowly, with lawyers on both sides, and with Zara's absolute insistence that Adam would have access to his father, because she was not doing to her son what had been done to her. She was not going to use a child as a weapon. She was not that kind of woman. She never had been. Cameron came to see her, once, during the proceedings. He came alone, without his mother, which was itself a kind of statement. He sat across from her in the meeting room of her lawyer's office and he looked at her with the face of a man who had finally, too late, looked clearly at something. "I didn't know," he said. "About my father. About the accounts." "I know," she said. "You knew for how long?" "A long time." A silence. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" She looked at him. "I tried to tell you sooner," she said. "Not the accounts. But the other things. The way your mother spoke to me. The way you never said anything. The way I kept asking for basic decency and you kept giving me silence." He looked at the table. "I thought you were managing," he said. "You always seemed like you were managing." "I was," she said. "I was managing alone. That's not the same as being fine." He had nothing to answer to that. She hadn't expected him to. "I'm sorry," he said eventually, quietly, like a man who means it but understands it is far too small. "I know," she said again. She meant it. She believed he was sorry. It didn't change anything. But it mattered, a little, that he'd said it. The proceedings lasted 8 months. At the end of them, Zara had her legal separation, a documented financial settlement that reflected her 7 years of contribution to the household and the business, and full primary custody of Adam with generous access rights for Cameron. The family business restructured under regulatory pressure. Rafiq faced formal financial penalties. The properties acquired through the shell company were frozen pending assessment. Sheila, the woman who had stood in a bedroom doorway on a wedding night and told a 24-year-old girl that how their relationship went depended entirely on her, did not speak publicly about any of it. She had nothing left to say that the documents hadn't already answered. Zara rented an apartment. A good one. 2 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, a small balcony with enough space for a few pots. She bought plants for the balcony because she had always wanted plants and nobody in that house had ever let her keep any. Too much mess, Zara. Too much water on the floor, Zara. She put Adam's room together herself, one afternoon, with the radio on. She let him pick the color. He chose blue. She painted it blue. She went back to work the week the apartment was ready. The firm had held her position. She had not fully stopped working even through the proceedings, because work was the thing that was entirely hers, the version of herself that had never needed anyone's permission to exist. Her Adam, on the evening she picked him up from school, would chatter the whole walk home. About his teacher, about a friend, about something he'd seen on the road that interested him, and she would listen to every word with her whole heart. He was fine. She had been afraid of what this would do to him. She had lay awake in the early months running through the damage, adding it up the way she added up everything, looking for the worst-case number. But Adam was fine. Children are more resilient than we give them credit for when one parent remains steady. She had remained steady. That was the thing she had given him when she couldn't give him a whole family. Her steadiness. And it had been enough. Her father came to visit the apartment on a Saturday, 3 months after she moved in. He walked through the room slowly, touching things lightly with his hand, the edge of a bookshelf, the back of a chair, the way people do when they are taking inventory of something they care about. He stood on the balcony for a while and looked at her plants. When he came back inside, he sat down and he looked at her with those careful eyes. "You knew," he said. "Before you left. You knew everything." "Yes." "For how long?" "A long time, Baba." He was quiet. "You protected me," he said, "from knowing. While your heart was breaking." She didn't answer. He leaned forward and took both her hands in his old hands, the hands of a schoolteacher who had spent 40 years holding chalk, and he said the thing she had not known, until that moment, that she needed to hear. "I am the most proud of you," he said, "that I have ever been of anyone in my life." She had not cried through the legal proceedings. She had not cried through the confrontations, the threats, the long cold nights in her parents' spare room with Adam asleep beside her. She cried now. She cried in her father's hands on a Saturday afternoon in her own apartment, with the light coming through the balcony door and her plants lined up in their pots, and it was the best cry she had had in 7 years. The kind that empties you clean. People ask her now, friends, sometimes, cautiously, whether she regrets the 7 years. Whether she wishes she had left sooner. She thinks about this honestly before she answers. And her honest answer is this. If she had left in the 2nd year, she would have left with nothing but her own story. A story that families like his can paper over with enough money and enough social connections and enough repetitions of the phrase she was difficult. She left in the 7th year with 57 documents, a forensic audit report, a lawyer who called her the most prepared client she had ever represented, and a financial settlement that meant she would never again have to ask anyone for permission to live her own life. She does not recommend 7 years to anyone, but she understands, clearly and completely, why those 7 years were hers. She needed to build something unbreakable. And unbreakable things take time. Zara is 32 now. Adam is 7. He has a small best friend named Tariq who comes over on Saturdays. They make a tremendous mess in the kitchen and she lets them, because mess in your own kitchen is one of the great underrated pleasures of being alive. She was promoted again last month. Senior Director. She has her own team now, 6 people, 2 of them young women fresh out of university who remind her a little of the version of herself she might have been if she had gone straight into her career at 24. She mentors them carefully. She gives them difficult work and watches them rise to it. She tells them, when they are frustrated, that frustration is the feeling of a skill growing. She got the idea for that from a teacher who left books on a kitchen table. She still thinks about Mrs. Hassan sometimes. She was from a different story, but the lesson was the same. The quiet women see everything. Never underestimate the quiet ones. The balcony plants are doing well. She has 7 now. She names them, not seriously, just for fun, the way you name things when you live alone and you've decided that silliness is an undervalued quality. Adam helped her name the largest one. He chose Captain. She agreed it was exactly right. There is one more thing. A small thing. A true thing. She drove past Cameron's family house once, 6 months after everything was finished. Not intentionally. She was on a different errand and the road took her past it. The house looked the same from the outside. Large. Well painted. The kind of house that suggests everything is fine. She drove past without slowing down. She did not feel triumph. She did not feel grief. She felt the simple, complete feeling of a person who is exactly where they are supposed to be. She was going home. Her own home. And the road there didn't pass through that house anymore. If this story stayed with you, if you recognize something in it, from your own life or someone you love, let this be the thing you take with you. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You don't have to perform your pain to prove it is real. You don't have to beg people to believe you when you have learned how to build something they cannot argue with. Keep the record. Trust the pattern. Do the quiet work. And when you are ready, when you have built something solid enough to stand on, walk out. With your head up. With your documentation in order. And with the simple, unshakable knowledge that you spent your time well. Thank you for staying with this story all the way to the end. If it meant something to you, share it. Someone in your life might need it today. Subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. Drop a comment and tell us, what moment in Zara's story hit you the hardest? And one last thing, where in the world are you watching from right now? We ask every time, because every time the answers surprise us. People watching from cities and small towns and places we've never been, all connected by the same stories. Let us know where you are. We'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves.